This podcast was very interesting as the podcast host had a completely contrary view to the man who wrote the book, How to Destroy a Pipeline. This podcast was hosted by David Remnick, and he is interviewing Andreas Malm on his book where he is encouraging property destruction as a form of protest. So this is a very interesting podcast, and here's how it went. So, Andreas Malm was making the argument that people ought to consider destructive protesting because peaceful protesting has not been successful. He talks about the issue of climate change and how important it is and how destructive fossil fuels are to the environment. And he says that it has not gotten enough attention and people are not making enough of a change. He believes that introducing property destruction would actually help the environment and it would encourage people to actually make a difference. But Remnick is questioning him and saying, well, there's a lot of issues that could come about with this, and it might not have the effect that you were hoping for. If someone were to ask me about the title of this book, I would make it clear to them that Malm is not encouraging harm towards people. He makes this very clear in the podcast that he's not talking about harm towards people. He's talking about harm towards property, harm towards fossil fuel infrastructure. But I think that the most important question that Remnick raised in this issue was whether or not this suggestion could lead activists to appear like terrorists and push away public support. I think that this was probably the best question because there's not much that Malm could say as a response. He cannot argue that this wouldn't cause public backlash because in almost every other destructive protest we've seen in the past, it has caused public backlash. And there would definitely be some people mad about property destruction. After hearing this podcast, I would say that I have to take the side of Remnick. I think he raised very important questions, and I think that it's always a risk when you bring up destruction in protesting. Even if you're not talking about harm towards people, it cannot be confirmed that there wouldn't be harm towards people. You're destroying property. That property could destroy pipelines that people are using. It's not a good suggestion all around, and it can't be sure that there wouldn't be backlash from the public. I think that when you bring up this question, especially when you're encouraging people in a book that anyone can read to destroy property, people reading it might not take it the same way. They might destroy important things. He's encouraging anyone who reads this book to destroy property, and that might not go well. This is why I would say that I side with Remnick, that this suggestion might actually lead climate activists to look like the villains, and it wouldn't necessarily have the effect that Andreas Malm was hoping for. That's my take on the podcast.